Hey beloved, I'm Lindsey T. Jackson, and this is Unlearning. In every episode, we explore the uncomfortable conversations you want in this safe container for ideas that you know and trust, magically weaving together storytelling, poetry, music, and panel discussions with expert guests. Unlearning is the only safe place to tackle the taboo conversations and questions that most hosts are too scared to take on. In a world where division is driving a wedge between workplaces and dinner tables, it is time to get uncomfortable and unlearn together. Before we get started, let's take a breath together. Deep inhale in. And deep exhale out. Coming fully into this space, releasing distractions, releasing that resounding drum that is telling you that you are only valuable if you are producing or checking your emails, and let us be fully present in this moment. Welcome to our panel. Today we're talking about unlearning hopelessness. And on the panel today is the great Unlearning producer, Laura Kaye Chamberlain, and some very special guests that Laura Kaye and I wanted to invite to cover this topic. So let's go through, ooh, those are pretty, them together. Laura Kaye is the Unlearning community host and producer. She is the director of Buzz and Hype at LTHJ Global. If you ever forget, it's in alphabetical order, Buzz first, then Hype. And she's Barb's kid, which is what we call Barb Chamberlain lovingly at LTHJ Global. You'll find Laura on any given day orchestrating the unlearning sessions, securing speaking engagements for Lindsey, strategizing ways to evolve the narratives around DEI, and high-fiving babies, which I can attest to. You're always high-fiving Cohen and Taylor. Those working with Laura have called them a Swiss Army knife, was that Ben Ruler, full stack creative producer, and all around good time. Welcome, Laura Kaye, to the virtual couch. Laura, why did we want to talk about hopelessness and unlearning hopelessness this month?
This is Laura, and this concept, I think, was very much for us. It was a little bit selfish. We worked really hard this year, and this idea came from you saying, you know, what I really want to do is just sit in a room with a bunch of like comforting Black aunties and have them tell me it's going to be okay. And we just kept talking about, you know, who are those people in our lives who remind us that it's possible for actual change to occur over time, and to tell us why we should keep trying and keep being patient and doing what we can. And we were like, it's our moms, because both of our moms have really lived out their values in their work and the rest of their lives, and they're who we genuinely turn to with these kinds of questions. So we just figured, let's bring them on.
Yeah, this is Lindsey. Laura, do you think that you and I are the only one experiencing feelings of hopelessness or despair, questioning our life's purpose, feeling burnt out, tired, hangry right now?
This is Laura again. Based on my experience trolling YouTube comments and Instagram and the chat starting to pop up here in Zoom, I'm gonna say no. I'm pretty sure. You know, things have the feeling. So the feeling tone I've been getting, you know, from people in our community reaching out and just being a person these days is very much overwhelmed with all of the things that I should be doing, that I could be doing, that I'm supposed to, you know, do these 100 little tasks and at the same time be making progress toward my bigger goals, our collective goals. Hey, what about the climate? Also, P.S. World War III. So there's a lot going on, and I certainly don't think that we're the only ones feeling this way. And I think that's why everyone's here today, because we want to be able to do the best we can. And I think that requires being together.
This is Lindsey. Anybody on the call, I see there's 69 of us. Please use whatever indication that makes sense for your body. Is anybody relating to these emotions that Laura's describing? I see head nod, Audrey, thumbs up, Tiffany and Ben. Yes, from Amy. Yeah. So let's get Barb's up here. Although we call her Barb, so it's not an excuse for everybody to just start calling her Barb. Barb Chamberlain is the Director and Active Transportation Division Leader at WS. And Laura's mother. Barb leads policy, planning, and capacity building for walking, rolling, and other forms of accessible and equitable active transportation. Barb has led her team creating the brand new Washington State Active Transportation Plan. I encourage you all to check it out. You can find it in the workshop deck. Winning multiple awards, including the National People's Choice Award from the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. Previously, Barbara was served in the Idaho State Legislature as a state representative and senator. All of that just as easy or harder, Barb? Like if you had to put it in being Laura's mom, serving in the state legislature, equal?
I think I might get more press over time being Laura's mom eventually. Although being a mom did put me in the newspaper early on. So, yeah. When they say there's no such thing as bad meat press,
This, I want you all to know, this is very much how this panel is going to go today. We're going to get all of our secrets aired here about Laura and Lindsey as children. Now, Barb slash, mom slash honorary Black auntie for the day. Like you've had this long journey of doing this work, and I don't want to assume, but I'm guessing that at times it was hard. It was hard really pushing this work forward of accessibility at, the transportation world and industry, that it's hard creating policy change in Idaho. How do you stay in it? How do you stick with it when it feels like I really just want to crawl up into bed with my pajamas and a bag of chips?
This is Barb. I don't see anything wrong with pajamas and a bag of chips, just for the record. I think I am very fortunate in that I am an optimist by nature. So I sort of start from a somewhat sunshiny attitude and I think this work would be much harder if I were a pessimist. I'm curious how many people here today actually would say, oh, I'm a pessimist. I start from negativity and it can only get worse. I think if you care about overcoming hopelessness, it's because you too are an optimist at some point. And that you have to find at least some, and I appreciate Kim's remark in the chat that pessimist, optimist is not a binary, really like that. And realist is in there. I am a pragmatic optimist. Mm-hmm. So I would also say, and I have two of my siblings, aunties and uncles for Laura are on today. I am the fifth of 6 children. I never got what I wanted the first time. Like there's all these people in line. And so I've always accepted that there would be some iteration, that I might get part of the cake, not all of the cake. And then you just go back later and get the cake.
Wow. Hesitating to invite you right up now, Deborah /mom, because also one of 6 children. But That doesn't make sense, Barb. Like, we're in a society that tells us that I should get everything that I want when I want it, and preferably within like 3 to 6 seconds of asking for it. Make it make sense. What do you mean I sometimes don't get everything that I want exactly when I want it?
People getting exactly what they want when they wanted it is why the planet is on fire and people are dying. So my inner realist just showed up. But that idea that maybe it's good things come to those who wait, that sounds a little too patient. I'm not quite that patient. Years and years ago, so my political experience was many years ago, somebody was angry at me for supporting a particular candidate. And this was for the governorship. And when you get to the general election, you only have 2 choices. And they said, you're just settling for the lesser of 2 evils. And I said, yes, I am. Because the other choice is, like, why would you ever say, I'm going to sit this one out? And if the greater of 2 evils wins, I'm good with that. So, like, there's only so much cake on the table. There's only so much there that we can make use of. So I guess that's the little kid. Uncle Jimmy's going to laugh. I should scroll down so I can see him laughing. It is the realist in the optimist.
Yeah, I love that. And welcome to Realist Barb. This is Lindsey. Well, allow me the great pleasure of introducing Deborah Holland, AKA independent HR consultant and coach, semi-retired. Thank you for putting that in there. And also my mom. For 13 plus years, Deborah was president of DLJ and Associates, a consulting firm providing a full range of general human resources expertise, including organizational capacity building, talent management, leadership training, succession, executive search, change management, DEI training, and professional coaching. Previously, Deborah served as VP of Staffing and Employee Relations for a global telecommunications company. She is a certified life and career coach, and today primarily enjoys her semi-retirement while coaching the next generation of leaders and spoiling her grandchildren despite their mother's continued request to stop giving them those items. Welcome, Mom, to our panel. Can you, as Barb was saying, this practical optimism, can you relate to that? And how have you maybe applied that also in the years of work that you have been involved in trying to move organizations forward in their care of humans and in their DEI practices?
Well, one, I would say, this is Deborah. I would say I agree with Barb. You move through optimism, realism, pessimism, I believe, hourly. In a day, you go through all of those emotions. I would also say I don't, I know, Lindsey, you and I had this conversation a couple of months ago about hopelessness and just looking at the news and how painful that could be some days. But doing this work, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, we know there are a lot of issues on a moment-to-moment basis, daily basis, we need to work on, and we need to make sure we're looking at it from the position that there's work to be done. There are people that need to hear this to move through these emotions, the principles, and the concepts, and understand that each one of us on the planet deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. And I believe that's what keeps us from falling into that hopelessness emotion and just going down, down, down. And also back to the point you talked about with Laura in terms of how people are feeling. We look at the news and know that, yes, a lot of people are feeling hopeless. We look at just mental illness issues and suicide rates, and we know that is happening, and the numbers are increasing for hopelessness. But we have to do our work every day, which is why I'm semi-retired and not retired. But we have to be a part of that. And we work out ways for ourselves and for those that we're in community with. For me, from the moment I left home, which was to come to Pittsburgh, to go to the University of Pittsburgh, there have been people in my life. Lindsey's on Shell, who's on this, who's in this webinar, and another friend of mine is on, Barb. I've known since I started my first job. So for 45, 50 years, there are people who've been in my life, and we each have to make sure we're building small community, larger communities, where there are people that we can go to and discuss the issues that are important to us, listen to ideas, and decide how to move forward.
Yes. This is Lindsey. This seems like a common theme that we hear. One, we hear it, it's deeply embedded within Black feminist teaching, but why is community such an important aspect of moving through our feelings of hopelessness? Not saying I want to get rid of my feelings of hopelessness, but moving through it. Laura, you also are involved in various spiritual communities, return to a spiritual practice, return to a martial arts practice. How is that community helping you move through these feelings of hopelessness?
This is Laura. Thank you for that question. It's funny to me because I practice at a Shambhala meditation center, which is essentially a combination of Buddhist practices and some shamanistic Tibetan lineage and teachings that have been passed and actually brought intentionally to the West, because there was this recognition that we freaking need it. And hope is seen within the Buddhist teachings as not too dissimilar from fear. And so when we were naming this event, I didn't want to go with hopelessness, because I was thinking for myself, hopelessness could be actually quite freeing. But I'm going to say in layperson's terms that hopelessness works. So let's go with it. We got to put up an event. We have 3 weeks. Okay. Those practices, the biggest assistance as far as feeling hopeful or hopeless, or like there is basically a reason to continue to do more than just sit on the couch and do the bare minimum that I can eke out. Actually, a sense of equanimity helps with that. And being humble and kind of right-sizing myself and being honest, like, no, you know what? I'm probably not going to change the world, because that's not an individual effort. And I see so many connections between Buddhist teachings and unlearning the attributes of white supremacy culture. And the combination of being able to kind of share insights back and forth has been really helpful for me in just practically waking up and like getting shit done and being okay and not breaking down. One of those is, like I was just mentioning, unlearning individualism. So individualism is an aspect of white supremacy culture. And it can be really easy when we're feeling scared or like we can't do enough, or like we should be doing these things, to kind of retreat and lick our wounds. And I certainly do that. I'm a big lick my wounds person. I like to go back into myself and self-soothe. And realizing that, the Sangha or the community is so vital it like these lessons are the same. It's just different ways of teaching them. And I think being in a community of practice, both at the Buddhist Meditation Center and here in the Unlearning sessions, genuinely, that's really been what's allowed me to keep learning and keep going.
Mm. This is Lindsey. You know, I'm listening to that, Laura, and wanting to name for people if they are, you're today old hearing that term, the attributes of white supremacy culture. You can go Google Tima Okun and Kenneth Jones's work and reference that research that Laura is referring to, or the dominant cultural norms of Western society. But I'm listening to you, Laura, and I guess I want to turn this to Deborah/mom and Barb/auntie. What if I'm listening to Laura and I'm like, yeah, but you know, we're just going backwards, and you know, I'm feeling like this is the first time we've ever experienced, you know, the rise of fascism, or experienced the loss of women's rights, or experienced economic downturn. You know, like I'm thinking, Deborah and Barb, that, you know, Mom, I know, for example, that you remember when schools were desegregated in Lynchburg, Virginia. Like, has there been any progress, or is it just, there's been no progress and we're going backward?
When I look around, there's been a lot of progress. I mean, yes, I do remember when schools were desegregated in Lynchburg, Virginia. I remember going to school, and it never dawned on me that all of the students and all of the teachers wouldn't look like me. And in Lynchburg, they decided, we don't want anyone burning Lynchburg down as they were in Danville, Virginia. So we're going to desegregate schools. I remember that day like it was yesterday. So yes, things have changed. There are some things that haven't changed. Lindsey, we were having this conversation several weeks ago, and I was commenting on going to the University of Pittsburgh, and I arrived in August. My roommate arrived in September. And in October, she decided to tell me that when she got to the room and her parents saw that she had a Black roommate, they were going to pull her out of college. And she convinced them to give me a chance. and she told me this story, and I said, you convinced them to give me a chance? And so you see, that was, 40 some years ago. And we went on to talk about, Barb and I worked together at a company here, and Barb's manager, one of my friends who's on the call, her manager could not wrap his head around the fact that she had a Black friend. He would talk to her about it all the time. And and that was, 30 some, 40 years ago. And just 2 years ago, Barb and I went to a restaurant to have a business meal, because she's been my IT person for as long as I've known her. And she went to the restaurant first, got the seats. I came and said, is someone waiting? And the person said, no, there's no one waiting. And they seated me. So 5 minutes, I'm never late, Barb's never late. 5 minutes later, I said, something's going on. She's never late. And we were calling each other at the same time. They sat me facing one way. Barb was sitting right behind me facing the other way, because she was a white woman, and they could not, in this restaurant, conceptualize that there was a white woman waiting for a Black woman. And that was just 2 years ago. So yes, things have changed, but you also see, and it's a lot of remnants. It's not here and there. You see it. You just see it. We experience it. But I hear what Laura's saying, because on a day-to-day basis, I may send Michelle 3 or 4 articles. I may send Barb some and say, look at this. Let's talk about what the issues are and think about this, because if we don't talk about it in community with the people that are in our lives, that are in the space that we live in, we can be hopeless and just give up, and with everything that's happening around us, for whatever reason these days, I keep remembering that thought, 1,000 paper cuts for people living in Black bodies. It's 1,000 paper cuts, and one of the things I've always recognized is that when I met Barb, we lived in the same apartment building on the same floor. And we worked at the same company, didn't know it, but she knocked on my door first. I never would have taken the opportunity to do that because I didn't want another paper cut. As a Black person being rejected for reaching out, but it's never bothered Barb. And, her manager couldn't wrap his head around, oh, she has a Black friend. She would sort of rub his face in it. Oh, I'm going to lunch with Deborah, and he would be speechless. And yes, that it still happens, but a lot still has changed.
Yeah, this is Lindsey. Knowing that Auntie Barb, she does strike me as a person that would rub their face in it. Good job, Auntie Barb. Yes, and obviously we've all, if anything we've learned today on this call, you got to find a friend named Barb, because they seem to be some pretty kick-ass white women. Barb Chamberlain on the panel, can you add to that, to what my mom / Deborah is saying? Like how when you came into this work, when you came into government many years ago, how many women were you looking at then who were around you in Idaho running to push policy forward? Has there been progress? Is it all just kind of going backwards? What keeps you coming back to it?
This is Barb Chamberlain, not the other Barb. I have to say, her name is not that common. The doll sort of killed it, I think. So if you meet a Barb, say hi from us. I want to pause and credit my mom, both with my sense of optimism and this need to make a difference. That's really how she raised me. And she shared stories of moments where, for a woman from little old Lewiston, Idaho, that she was able to recognize things that today we might label privilege. That's not a word she would have known, but that she noticed and she said things. And so that noticing, and then that need to do something about what you have noticed. I was raised with that. And so as a mom, I think I see my evidence in the corner of this screen with Laura Kaye, and with my others, that's a thing moms do. You give your children whatever resources or inspiration you can, and you don't have to be their biological mom to do that. That significant person in someone's life who says, yes, I believe in you. Yes, you can do that. I'm not going to should on you, SHOULD. Don't should on yourself. Just say that 5 times fast. I did want to pick up on what Deborah was saying about change over time, and what you said, Lindsey, because I was elected to legislature in 1990, and I was the youngest woman ever elected. And I represented the district that had the neo-Nazi Aryan Nations compound in it. I dealt with Nazis. I went to parades to turn my back on Nazis. And I ran as a pro-choice candidate when that right was under attack. And I thought we did those things. We held a pro-choice majority. We got a governor's veto of a bad bill on that issue. We did the effort in human rights work so that the Aryan Nations compound is now a peace park. And yet we still have Nazis, and we still have people trying to tell us what to do with our bodies. So I guess pragmatic optimism and a fair amount of stamina, because it doesn't get done. It's making me think of fashions. If you keep it long enough, it comes back in. Your skirt length will be right again someday. Unfortunately, some really bad ideas in politics seem to come back around or never get totally vanquished.
Yeah. This is Lindsey. You know, one of the reasons when Laura Kaye and I sat down to chat about this, again, one of the things that we often look to in Black and Brown cultures is the practice of bringing multi-generations together into spaces to learn and grow. And Barb, one of the things you just said, I think that is really interesting, is that we forget that influence goes two ways, that we can be influenced by our carers and take that drive for activism, that drive for justice, and share that with our children, but that also one of the things that Laura Kaye and I talk about with our moms is that you also allow yourself to be influenced by us, allowing that with our, 30 or some odd years of a different experience of the world, that you also allow us to share, hey, okay, let me teach you about pronouns and etc. Let me teach you about such and such. Why is that important? And this is to anybody, Laura, Barb, Deborah, or how do you cultivate that personality of allowing yourself to be influenced in your change, influenced so that as we age, we do not default to conservatism?
This is Barb Chamberlain. I'll share an initial thought, springboarding off what Laura said about her Buddhist practice. And I've also read a fair amount, and I don't pick something specific to affiliate with, but that comes pretty close. And you have to let go of ego. When I was a young woman, I was right about everything. All you had to do was ask, and I would let you know. And if I was right, you were probably at least a little bit wrong. And gosh, that feels good. And who doesn't like being right? And I mean that in the correctness sense, not the political spectrum sense. That when I matured, and I don't know if I learned this from the younger generation, but maybe when I matured enough to realize that I really benefited from being quiet and listening and learning. And then I got even more mature, and I would let that show. So if I misstated something and said it the way I didn't want to in a meeting, and if I immediately say, oh, I just used an ableist term and I don't mean to do that, and so I will not be using your word again, I let everybody know that I caught myself, and if they didn't know about that, they also just got a learning moment. So that we don't have to be perfect, I think, is a piece of that. And so that's a thing, watching your kids try and stumble and get up again, that's a way we learn from those younger than us too.
Yeah. This is Lindsey. Deborah, I thought you had a thought.
Well, to your question, I just remembered you as a child. And, I always believed that Unshell and I we role modeled that we have to take a stand on some issues. And, we would say, Lindsey, this is why we have to take a stand. My way of doing things was usually to be in someone's space. Unshell would write letters, and we would always talk about it. But we both believed that we were role models, and we had to teach our children, one, how to stand up for themselves and how to respect other people's right to have space, just as you did. And that's why it was so important to me. It was so important to us because, it takes a village. The village for you, Lindsey, was Unshell and a number of other people. It was important. It was important for me to have people in your life, not just me, who would be role models in terms of this justice work, this, respect is such a major issue in terms of diversity and inclusion. And we never wanted to forget that.
Yeah, this is Lindsey. I'm realizing here again, we keep coming back to this notion of community, and I think we do not talk about just community enough, and the fabric of community and the import of community. As you said, Laura, we tend to default back to that individualism that we are taught within Western society. And as you all are sharing, I'm even realizing how, and maybe Laura, you're relating to this, how I'm remodeling those same patterns, because for me growing up, you know, it was always like I would tell my mom and then I would say, don't come down to the school, right? Like, and she would say, either you figure it out or I will be down at the school. And I'd be like, I'm going to tell you this, but don't come down to the school, right? But now I hear my own children saying this to me. They're like, don't come down to the school. But also, my 8-year-old just led a protest on making sure that the third graders' rocks didn't get confiscated, and wrote some very nice letters to the school board and to the principal. And I'm here to tell you that the rocks were saved.
Yes.
So it's something that we learn and teach. Laura, what's coming up for you?
This is Laura. First of all, absolute pride in that rock protest because I was following that.
Hashtag rocks.
Thank goodness. Yeah, I did have one thought on learning from other generations. And then I want to keep going on the topic of community, because I think that's fantastic. I don't know if I have something to say there right now. But just sharing from the perspective of, this is a little difficult to share, but I just want to name how hard it can be to call in your parents. So, pardon me. I know it's all right here. So my dad died a couple of years ago, but before he died, we had a very difficult conversation in which I basically called him in about his non-acceptance. He had a tolerance, but I'll say non-belief in regards to trans people. And this was before I was recognizing, well, gosh, it might have been around the same time, but this was mostly before I was recognizing that I also wanted to identify as non-binary. But I was speaking as an ally, and he said something or told a joke. Basically, I said, that's not funny, because the point of the joke doesn't make sense. And in that conversation, I felt like, I can feel it now a little bit. I felt my chest tightening. I felt probably the biggest adrenaline rush that I had, since I rode a roller coaster. Like, it was really it was like my body was just screaming with how difficult this was. I couldn't remember. I mean, there've probably been 3 or 4 times in my life where I really questioned my father, and he didn't take it that well either. For an Idaho man who's very liberal, and he never would bother anyone. He would never come up to someone, make it a problem in their day. He wouldn't say something hurtful to them, but the way that you think about people impacts how you interact with them, whether you realize it or not. And the things you say to your friends in private matter. And I felt it was important to question his beliefs and to, share research, because he's very much one of those guys who goes to, well, what's your source, right? So I tried to stay pretty calm and grounded in what I knew. And we ended up agreeing to disagree, which is not a satisfying outcome for me. I was very ready to win. But the point of me having that conversation, I felt, it's almost like managing up at work can be really difficult. It felt like a similar kind of challenge in that you are a leader, you are somebody who's important to me. And I knew that if I avoided that conversation, one, I wouldn't feel okay with myself. And two, I wouldn't be giving him the benefit of the doubt that he could learn. And I knew he could. And so I was actually trusting him to be able to at least take in the information. And he was. And we had that conversation and it was fine. And I lived and my heart kept beating and it didn't explode like I thought it would. And, you know, I'm sure he checked out those articles and I'm sure he at least had a few more question marks in his head after that conversation. And there was also a part of it that for me had to be letting go the outcome. And I think that's a lot of what comes to mind for me, in Unlearning Hopelessness. I can hope that I am able to do my best. I can hope that we are able to come together and collaborate and make something we believe in happen. I can release the outcome. I think there's a book called Active Hope that talks about that in relation to climate justice and climate change. And basically I was able to do what I could and then let the outcome go. You know, just kind of work the plan and then let things take the time they need. Thank you, everyone in the chat. You're all so sweet.
This is Lindsey. Wow, Laura. I mean, obviously, yes, stop. Everything that you are saying, sorry, Grammy, your grandchildren are saying hello and want you to know that they're here. Laura, everything that you're saying is clearly impacting everyone and they're feeling that. And I'm just, thank you for allowing us to hold space for that story and that journey that you've been on, because there is something, and I think Barb, you alluded to this earlier, where we equate hopelessness with also attachment to an outcome, right? I'm hopeless because I didn't get the exact outcome that I wanted and in the time that I wanted it. And that those two do not necessarily need to coexist. I can remain hopeful in, my journey, my practice. I can remain hopeful in my ability to keep expanding the ripple of community and liberation and justice work. And sometimes in our most intimate spaces, have to detach from an expectation in a specific relation, or an expectation in a certain workplace, or an expectation that I will experience change overnight. Or I think, as we've been experiencing lately, that if we do not remain vigilant, that we will not lose rights that we thought we had won. Laura, you wanted to say something else about community.
Thank you. This is Laura. I'm okay. I really want to hear the mom's responses to that.
Mom?
Lindsey, this is Deborah. I wanted to repeat or link to what Laura was talking about in terms of having the conversation with her dad. And it's so important that all of us doing this work remember having the conversation, introducing the concept of justice and respect and inclusion. You're introducing it. There are so many, as you said, Lindsey, living in a white supremacist patriarchal society. There's so many things that, on a daily basis, we're told, let it go. It's always been that way. I remember Lindsey came home once and she said to her father, suppose I dated there's a young person at school, or there's a boy at school I like, and he's white. And I thought he was going to flip a gasket. And we had the conversation. Lindsey had the conversation first, because I would always say to her, you got 2 weeks to have the conversation, whoever it was. She had the conversation, then I had the conversation, but you have to introduce it. You have to have the conversation, introduce the concept. And as Laura, as everyone has said, and then you walk away and you let it, marinate. And they may not get to the outcome we want, but we've introduced it and we've opened some space for new ideas and new concepts. And that's our commitment in community and interacting with one another also.
Yeah.
Laura Chamberlain, I want to pick up on, and I will just own the moment where I thought, is this about me? When she said she called in a parent, like, I'm one of the parents, I'm on the call. Should I shut my camera off now? Just saying it. I would say that if we were in Lindsey's living room with a glass of wine, so I thought I'd say it now. What I'm thinking of is a cohort training I went through earlier this year called the Barn Raisers Project. And I will drop a link in the chat. This is a white man organizing white people to do anti-racist work or whatever kind of work they want to do in their community that will be fundamentally anti-racist. And I will pause and say, there's being against things and there's being for things, and you need both. Like if you're against racism, what is it that you're for? That's the thing. That's the thing to have hope in. But in the Barn Raisers Project, he's like this guy from Montana wearing a ball cap. Not dissimilar from Laura's father in appearance, actually. And one of the things he said is that you really, in organizing, you have to start from the fundamental belief that all people have some worth, that all people are worth talking to. All meaning all, and that's really hard. But he's also saying, like, it's my job as a white person to have that conversation for somebody who could give Deborah a paper cut. I got to carry that. I don't know if I want to say my people, but that's my people. And the organizing skills that he talked about that were about not trying to convince, not trying to activate you to go turn out to the polls, to just have a conversation and be in community, you and I together in that moment, to see if we can find a toehold of common ground, and that you might think about later. And the next time somebody else is bold enough to have that conversation, you might be another step ahead. It was really good. Oh, and got another white dudes talking with white dudes things in the chat.
Yes, this is Laura. We love Ben Ruler, who's here today. His event later this week is actually a conversation with white dudes. Literally, I think that's what it's called. It is sold out. So sorry, everyone. Get on the wait list.
Sold out.
And also Joel Kampf is another man we've loved partnering with and collaborating with, and he has white work, which is around finding a positive white identity, which sounds like a tall ask for a lot of people, I know. So if anyone wants our contact info, we'll hook you up. Joel was on the Unlearning White Complicity panel, so you can find that on YouTube. Plug.
I want to turn to some audience questions. So if you have those, please go ahead and drop them into the chat so that I can receive them. And while you're doing that, as I'm listening to you, Mom/Deborah, Barb/Auntie Laura Kaye, I'm hearing this through line again of the I, we, us work. There's the work that I am doing within myself to process my feelings of hopelessness and realize how tied hopelessness is to my fear. It's a way to say, oh, I'm feeling fearful of what? What am I feeling fearful of? Am I feeling fearful of losing my voice? Am I fearful of losing my power? Am I fearful of losing my place in society? Whatever that is, I am fearful of what? Once we can name that for ourselves, we often feel as though we're empowered again. And the we work, that coming back into community, avoiding that lull to, I'm a big fan also, Barb, of getting under the covers and pulling them up over my head and sleeping 13 hours to restore myself, but then coming back into community to experience love, to experience connection, to experience what, as Brene Brown reminds us all, the call of all of our souls as a human that desires belonging and connection. And that is only done within community. But one of the things that I often see in our work is that why so many people are experiencing this emotion that I wouldn't actually call hopelessness. It feels more like despair, is what you just said, Barb, that we have been taught that the reaction is this person is not giving me something that I want, or this movement, this party, this whatever is not giving me something that I want. And so my response should be to dehumanize them or to move away. And that is actually an illness for the self as well. To think that the way that I am going to correct somebody, amend somebody, deal with my fear is to remove myself from community with them. That's the lie of WeWork. WeWork is that's exactly when you lean in closer. If you want to really change something in this country, if you're looking at policies that you do not like or do not understand, if you're reading social media and you're going, how does somebody think that this could possibly be the truth? You better get out of your house, get in your car, and get out of homogeneity and go spend some time with people who believe that that is the truth. Until you understand it, there's no possibility of change, which is the us work. That is the us work. Jack says, Deborah, Barb, and Laura, how do we let go of the outcome? How do we let go of the outcome when it feels as though we really want that parent to change their mind, when it feels as though we really want our organization to move forward quickly in their DEI work? We want policies to change. Deborah, Barb, Laura Kaye, anybody? How do we change our attachment to the outcome?
This is Deborah. I believe the only way to do that really is to remember that, as Laura indicated, Laura is Laura. Her father was her father. You had to come to this meeting of the minds in terms of, which sometimes is hard for whether it's, a parent or a child. You're you and I'm me. You believe what you believe, and I believe what, I believe. And we must get to the point where we remember every minute in community, in individual engagement also, that, we are who we are. And I can't make, Laura, Lindsey, Barb, anyone believe what I believe. We can talk about it. And as Laura said, they agreed to disagree, which is truly respect. They agreed to disagree. It's, I respect you and your beliefs. Please respect me. And it is letting go of the outcome just in that agreeing to disagree.
Yes. Want to add, Barbara, Laura?
My baby girl want to go? This is Laura.
This is Laura. We both defer, so it's funny. I feel like I'm playing chicken. I also want to hear your answer, Lindsey. I'll name that. I suppose in addition to, releasing from the outcome, I really appreciate the 7 generations approach or principle. I'm not remembering which specific Indigenous tribe this is accredited to. I think it's a number of tribes across North America. And of course, it's not just a North American, belief. This is really a truth that we've received, especially from Indigenous cultures, which is that change takes generations. And so, and this is something that at LTHJ Global, we bring ourselves back to internally a lot, because what we're doing today is often planting a seed or watering a seed that's been planted, or weeding 1-2 things. And it feels so small because, it's not enough, but it's not enough on its own. You don't create an entire forest by yourself. You don't rehabilitate soil in a day. So recognizing that this is not a personal failing of mine. I am not a failure because I have not, convinced my father of what I believe in. And I'm not a failure because one day I was too tired to read the news or do something about it. I'm part of something bigger. There are other people out here doing this. I'm not alone, and I'm not a solo savior. I'm not a white savior or, a woman savior, a non-binary savior who's going to come in and do this on myself. And in fact, to get hooked on that and hooked on how it would make me feel to be that character is not the point. The point is, I want a better world for me to live in, for my friends and family to live in, and for my nibblings. That's a non-gendered word for niece and nibbling or other nibbling. I want a better future for them. And I can do what I can do, no more, no less. And I think sometimes it's easy for me to fall into a sense of apathy or, oh, there's too much for me to do, or I'm not doing enough. When I do less than I can, and when I do more. And it's just a constant balance. But it's not intellectual. We feel it when we're kind of in the pocket. I'm doing what I can. I'm partnering with other people. And at the end of the night, I'm just letting that shit go.
Barb, one of the things I'm thinking about is that last week I had the chance to be at a summit that Dr. John A. Powell spoke at of the Othering and Belonging Institute. And he described why you have to talk about othering to talk about belonging. And I'm listening to this and thinking, I don't want to be othered by somebody who doesn't understand who I am, what I've learned, that I am still willing to learn. And how would you know that unless we actually had an honest conversation? And so maybe that's a piece of letting go of the outcome. There's an outcome for the other person in this too. What outcome do you want them to have? Does it feel good? If you got their outcome, would that feel good to you? So maybe there's a piece of that or something in that. Again, if you get that pragmatic optimism one more step, and then you've made it that much easier for the next person. I also think when we talk about letting go of outcomes, any other advice column readers here who entertain themselves at lunch, reading advice columns? I thank you for the hands that are going up. Don't they always say to let go of the things you can't control? We cannot control outcomes. We can control our inputs and outputs that we're bringing to it. And that's all the span of control we have.
Yeah. Amazing, everyone. And I think as I hear all of that, what's coming to mind, again, I know we quoted a million times within this work, but Audre Lorde's quote of, we cannot rebuild the master's house using the same tools. And so this assumption that our work is to change everybody to have the same opinions as we do, that's not the work. And so I would send you back into your homework to question if that is how you enter the work, with the assumption that the outcome should be they have the same opinions, beliefs, and values that you do. That's not DEI work either. In my own life, Jack, what I would say is that I've cultivated a practice when I am trying to release from the outcomes of reminding myself that because in my belief, all things are deeply connected, the person that I am sitting across from is me. I am them. We, in my opinion, exist more like trees in that we are deeply connected. We are constantly communicating with one another, even when we think we're not communicating with one another. We're influencing one another in deep quantum theory, physical ways, and we'll have another class on string theory one day. I digress. The point being that instead of focusing on, I'm not getting the outcome that I want, I use that energy to look at what is it in me that I feel is lacking. What is this person triggering in me, in the sense that, especially in intimate relationships like parents or colleagues, if I'm not getting something that I want and I feel anger or fear welling up, what is it that I think I will not be able to provide for myself? Is it that I feel as though I do not have enough love for myself to fill the space that I think that this person owns? Do I feel like I will not have enough capacity for myself to fill the space that I think this person is meant to do in my workplace? I use it as an interrogation practice for myself to question what I think is lacking within. And then remind myself again and again, I am already whole. I am already enough. Dear Unlearning community, as always, let us finish with the reminder that we are you, you are us. We are always in community. And we extend this moment out to all of the various homes that we are calling in from, all of the offices, all of the countries. And isn't technology an amazing thing that we could just zoom in here and be in community together, even just for an hour and 15 minutes. And it is our work, and it is blessed work at LTHJ Global. When you need a pep talk, when you need a reminder that you are loved, that you are seen, that you are enough, all you have to do is drop us an email, pick up that phone, meet again here in January. And we can be hopeless together. We can be pragmatic optimists together. We can be depressed. We can be nihilistic. We can just be together. Thank you, Deborah Holland. Thank you, Barb Chamberlain. Thank you, Laura Kaye. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Auntie. Thank you, dear friend. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Jamika. Thank you for our producer for the day, Jay Alba. And if that isn't a sign of progress, you have a Black woman, a queer woman, and a first-generation immigrant who are the co-founders of this company. Progress, even if you don't want it, is happening. Happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2023. This is Lindsey. Shout out to Jamika and Christina and Jay for having a wonderful show. Barb, Deborah, Laura, how did you feel? Anything you felt? I wish I had said this.
I said everything I didn't use on my notes, but but you know, I thought the flow, I thought it was very good, as I usually do. I believe this space can have an impact, and in each of the ones I've participated in, I walk away with, as Lindsey knows, she gets notes. Now Laura gets the notes. Laura and Lindsey get the notes now. You know, may want to think about this, and now they're both getting. Lindsey's always gotten the articles. Now Laura gets the articles. You need to think about this. So I think it was good. Good.
It always unfolds in ways that it should, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
This is Barb. I've had a committee meeting conflict with this, I think, from the beginning. And I've actually been saying, could we kind of reschedule, like in 2023 for this other meeting? Can we put it at a different time? So I will finally be able to start coming on a more regular basis. And I want to, because I could feel that sense of community as people were saying hello to each other and hello to the space, that that there's something really growing here. And I love that. That's creating the intentional time and space really matters for people. So that was an awesome part of it. I was thinking about, was there something I meant to say that I didn't? I had a couple of things I would have dropped in. One is reading Rebecca Solnitz's book, Hope in the Dark, a few years ago, that, you know, once upon a time, rivers caught fire. And it may be a spiral, but it's a spiral that I hope is heading the right direction. Again, at that conference I was at last week, where one of the speakers, and it might have been Dr. Powell, I'm not sure, but somebody said the arc of justice, you know, the arc bends towards justice, but only if you pull on it. And that kind of like, this is the point. You need hope to keep doing that.
Yeah. Laura, were there any questions you wanted to ask the moms that you didn't get to ask?
Ooh, this is Laura. Which also I want to mention, I feel like we were pretty slick with the self intros for ASL. Just great job, everybody. Oh yeah, I did have some questions for the moms. I will say first, just like overall, how did that go? I was way more nervous than I expected. I was like shivering. I can't believe it. I do this every month. And I literally am trained in musical theater. And for the last like 3 hours, I've been like, I'm a shaky chihuahua. I'm just like, there are so many people. Yeah. Like you made sure they all got the calendar invite. You know how many people there are. But anyway, so I was surprised by how nervous it made me. That was kind of fun. My questions for the moms, let me think of I had a few. I was kind of curious, what tactics do you think don't apply that used to work?
What tactics regarding what?
Social justice or change or advocating for DEI, all of the things that we're talking about, civil rights movements and workers' rights movements. I'm curious if there's anything that's like, oftentimes people will say, look to the past to see what's worked. And that's kind of another question that I have. What tactics do you think still apply today? Maybe, a conversation is always an effective tool, whatever, but what should we not try to repurpose or reuse from the past that just frankly wouldn't work in today's world? And this would be a question also for you, Lindsey, just in general, or Jay, or Jamaica, or Christina.
When growing up, the only issue was around race. When I was growing up, as Lindsey said, in my lifetime, I remember the schools being desegregated, and when I worked in one of the corporations I worked in here, we were talking about, our lived experience. And I said something to a couple of my coworkers about having to drink out of a colored water fountain. And I mean, they looked in disbelief, as in, that didn't happen in your lifetime. I mean, that happened in my lifetime. And those conversations help people remember that didn't happen so long ago that it's not important to us and to our children. That happened in my lifetime. I'm 70. And what doesn't work is narrowing to me the issues that you're looking at. We have to expand this, acceptance and being open to, difference and similarity. It was unheard of, during the 60s. The school in my community was desegregated in the late 60s, but that was it. It was all about race. Black and white children, and at the time we were Negro, going to school together, big deal, so what doesn't work is being narrow in focus. We have to be open.
This is Lindsey. I was going to say the exact same thing. So I agree 100%. It is continuing that that focus on just one affinity group, right? Like, understandably, within the context of the United States of America, we're going to start with race because our caste system is built upon race. If I'm in the UK, I might start with class. If I'm in, other areas, I might start with tribalism. I might start with religious imperialism, etc. However, I find that still people get so focused, just as you're saying, Mom, on one topic, whereas we're not bringing people together in mass across different experiences of oppression. If I'm not, as a Black woman doing this work, also thinking about the experience of a poor white man in pockets of our country, I've missed the opportunity to get us aligned in purpose in order to, and again, not aligned, but to say, I see you too, and this work that I'm doing will also benefit you. You don't have to join it, you don't have to like it, but don't get in my way, because this will also benefit you. And I think that is still so much a byproduct of how we are cultured, right? As I said before, right? Richard Pryor, one of the most amazing and succinct statements about our society, things he ever said was, every person needs a nigger, right? And we will just pivot to find somebody else who will be beneath us, right? And so within the Black community, still deeply struggling with LGBTQIA issues, right? If I'm white passing Latinx, or I can be white adjacent Asian, who's bringing this thing forward to the Supreme Court right now, trying to get, legislation turned back on affirmative action, right? It is, there has been a ploy used to motivate the Asian community around this, as opposed to seeing their issues as aligned. It is to still use that narrative of the model minority in order to drive that messaging. And that divisiveness is still very much intact. And that, to me, is an old strategy that has to stop.
So really what you're looking at is the issues around power and who has it. And who's trying to keep it.
And who's trying to keep it. Yeah.
Like, it's a very basic issue around power.
Yes. And as long as you can keep dangling, those with the most power continue to keep dangling the potential of access to power, we keep people divided, right?
And I'll dangle it. If you give me what I want, then I'll give you some of it, but you have to help me continue to suppress somebody else. But I mean, you really have to pull apart those issues around power. And then you deal with those class issues, all of that. And you're absolutely right, Lindsey. There's so many of us that fit in those, when you look at class and status, race and, racism, sexism, all of the isms fit in there, but it really is around power.
Yeah.
This is Laura. There's some quote that's making me think of paraphrasing basically something along the lines of, the problem with our country or our world is that people see themselves as a future millionaire rather than, basically your average 99%er. There's a rough paraphrase, but the idea really stuck with me. I'll find the original quote. Like you were saying, Lindsey, people are dangling this, manifest, aspire, like set your vision of yourself is that you're a millionaire. And so, I can certainly include myself in this. I'm not saying like, oh yeah, everybody else does this. No, I literally do this. I would love to have millions of dollars, in part to give away, in part to freaking keep and eat and drink coffee, right? Selfish. But if I see myself, Squirrel
Vodka's
Chops in Seattle.
expensive.
It is. They just opened their. I'm not going to wax poetic about Squirrel Chops. They were a walk up only, and they're inside now, and I'm so stoked. But yeah, it's like $7 at this point. So like if I see myself,
a millionaire.
I know, honestly, it's feeling like that at this
$2
point.
a cup.
Yeah, Jay's right. We love Avole across the street. It's a great, such a good coffee shop. But if I'm seeing myself or envisioning myself or imagining that I'm like, I am going to be part of the 1%, and so I'm on their quote unquote side, rather than, no, let's be realistic. I'm basically like the rest of the 99% who are not like, financially way past where other people are going to get. And even if I were a millionaire, by the time I get there, it's not going to be enough. We have a huge class divide and huge inequity, and just financial inequality. And so it's basically, that quote to me says like, get real. You are the proletariat, and the proletariat have to freaking come together. Don't tell yourself, oh, I'm going to be one of these rich people, so I want to maintain richness. No, you're probably going to stay one of the proletariat. So like bring up the bottom, universal basic income, free healthcare. Like you will need these services. One day you will be old and you will need support and care. Like don't get so full of your fantasy self that you start to actually believe this is going to be most of your experience of life. And so side with the policies that would be good for that person or that version of yourself.
This is Lindsey. That would be an amazing unlearning session.
We have to do
Unlearning the
classism.
millionaire. Yeah, well, there you go. Unlearning classism, we said we want to teach.
That would be, to me, just listening to that, that's to do that in an hour, to even start talking about it in an hour session. It's just so many, threads in classism,
This is Laura. I'm curious because I see we're basically at time. Mama Barb, did you have any response to that question of tactics that you think don't apply anymore, or maybe tactics that you think especially do?
One of the things I think is probably done with is petition, quantities of names on things, because it's too easy and you don't know what you clicked. And the other day, somebody said, oh, why can't I get more signatures on this thing about climate? Well, because I do research. I want to know who I'm giving my name to. I trace it back and I find out it's a bunch of clean energy companies, and all of their money goes to elect Republican legislators. Like you could do the homework. And so maybe that's a two-part answer. One is anything that feels too easy to just lend my name. That means people are going to start texting me and asking me for money. And I'm tired, and I opted out of all of those. So that's both an old and a new tactic. It's technology enabled. And I think people are weary of that. At the same time, the advantage is I could do that research inside of about 90 seconds. And so that breaking what Deborah was talking about of not being isolated, I can look for those intersections. I can find people like me, no matter how fine-grained my definition of like me is, that I am not alone. And I think that's one of the things that's hopeful too is, I can't remember who to credit. It might be Alice Wong, but whoever came up with the hashtag disability so white and said, look at the faces you're putting on questions around disability and access. And it's another place where class also shows up. And my work relates directly to universal design, because we're all going to need universal design. That ability to identify those commonalities, I think that's the new tactic that's the most exciting, as long as we continue to do that calling in and creating community that doesn't get stuck on the identity, that is inclusive of the identity, both and. I dropped a thing in the chat during the main session from the head of the Working Families Party, and he was talking about building resilient organizations and the nature of power. And it's a long piece, but it's a really, really good one that I think fits with this topic.
Wow. Wow. As always, this is Lindsey. As always, we need another session to continue this topic. But thank you for this multi-generational time, even with the grandkids popping in to ask if we can watch something and go to PJs and popcorn this evening at school. Right while Laura was having her big emotional outpouring.
They're like, yeah, real cute. But peaches and popcorn, though.
They're like,
Thank you until or later, Laura.
Yeah. Saved by the bell. Thank you, everybody, for all the coordination and sharing. And we all had some of our own people there, and it was a really, really like warm group. So whoever we attracted was really, it was a great set of people.
That's the right people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is Laura, pardon Jamaica, because we have just all talked in we did a pretty good job of not doing this. But let's at least close out the recording and let our interpreters head out to be respectful of their time. And we probably all have chips to eat. So yeah, this was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mom.
It was nice meeting you.
Thanks, Mom.
Bye.